In the Eastern Economic Forum, Russia accused the United States of trying to devalue its $37 trillion of national debt without informing the American people. How? By using stablecoins, crypto, and gold. So if you hold dollars or stablecoins or have a retirement fund, you want to pay attention. And to be clear, my goal in this video was to help clarify what's happening. That way you can avoid the rumors that are going around on the internet and, of course, find better investment opportunities for you. Let's start with the foundation. Why does Russia care that the United States government has $37 trillion worth of national debt? Now your first guess might be, maybe Russia owns a lot of this debt. There are four main entities that have lent money to the United States government that the United States government owes this money back to. They are, number one, regular people, because people like you and me can lend money to the United States government. It's called buying a treasury. Why would people do that? Because when you lend money to the United States government, they're going to pay you back plus interest. Entity number two are institutions. There's a lot of large banks and institutions out there that will lend and keep their money in treasuries because it's a way for them to save their money and also generate some interest. Number three are foreign governments and foreign countries. Maybe that could be Russia, but before I talk deeper about that, there's also number four, which is the central bank, the Federal Reserve Bank, who, if there's not enough money coming from here, the Federal Reserve Bank will then print that money out of thin air and then lend the money to the United States government. So maybe Russia is one of those foreign countries that has lent a lot of money to the United States government, because at the time of me recording this video, foreign countries have lent about $9 trillion to the United States government. Well, turns out that's not the case. The largest foreign lenders to the United States government are Japan, the United Kingdom, and China, and Russia has become significantly reducing their level of United States debt after the United States began ramping up sanctions on Russia back in 2018. Which brings us back to the original question: why is Russia concerned about the United States government's $37 trillion of debt, especially if they don't really have a vested interest in that debt, if they don't actually own that debt? This is where we can only speculate, but maybe it has something to do with undermining the United States dollar dominance. Remember, the United States dollar is the world's reserve currency, which means the world's trade is happening through the United States dollar. And if there can be more distrust with the dollar, it's easier for more countries to want to move away from the United States dollar. So it seems more likely that the reason why Russia would want to say this is as a way to want to distance themselves and other countries from the United States dollar. But now that we understand the why, let's understand what Russia exactly said. Read this. According to Putin's advisor, the United States plans to solve its financial problems at the world's expense, this time by pushing everyone into the, quote, crypto cloud. Now this is where things get really interesting, but also a little complex, so I'm going to break this down into three parts. Number one is this means now tokenizing the United States debt. I'll explain what that means in just a minute. Then number two, working to devalue or reset our national debt. Again, I'll explain what that means. And then number three, start over at the expense of all the debt holders. So let me break this down one by one, and this is where I also want to remind you that for those of you that are investors or want to become investors, I put together a brand new free investing masterclass where I'll walk you through how you can get started as an investor and find hidden investment opportunities before everybody else. I'll show you the exact system and framework that my firm uses to research investment opportunities before they hit the headlines. So there's a lot of value in this masterclass. It's completely free, and when you register for the masterclass, you're also going to get access to market briefs, which is my newsletter for investors, all for free, complimentary at no cost. So if you want to get the investing masterclass and market briefs all for free, all you have to do is click the link down in the description below to register. So let's start with what it means to tokenize the debt. And this is where Putin's advisor says that the United States is now trying to rewrite the rules of the gold and cryptocurrency markets. So let's break this down. If you wanted to lend money to the United States government today, you can do that by going to the Treasury Direct website. The only problem with that is there are limitations, because not everybody in the world can access this United States debt. It is more difficult to do, it takes more time, and there's more fees associated with that. And this is where tokenizing the United States debt would mean taking the United States debt and putting it on the blockchain. That way it's as easy as buying a stable coin to actually lend money to the United States government. So that would mean taking the United States debt, making it into a digital asset. That way anybody can buy it and sell it on the blockchain. Now, if you've never bought anything on the blockchain before, you might say that's very difficult because I've never done it before. But think of it kind of like buying a stock. If you open up a brokerage, then you can just deposit money and buy it with the click of a button. So it's simple if you know how to do it. And this step one of tokenizing the United States national debt is already kind of happening. Some of the major Wall Street banks like Wisdom Tree and Franklin Templeton have already created tokenized funds that give you exposure to United States treasuries. And even the Federal Reserve Bank has begun addressing this point because the Kansas City Fed wrote an article about the concept of tokenizing the United States treasury. Now there's four main benefits that you want to pay attention to when it comes to tokenizing the debt. Number one would be liquidity, because if it is on the blockchain, that means you can buy and sell this treasury with a click of a button, and you can buy fractional shares of the treasury because it'll be more accessible. Number two is the global reach, because if it's on the blockchain, that means you can have somebody in Kenya buying this treasury, you could have somebody in Mexico buying these treasuries, and it opens up the reach for more people, regular people around the world, to lend their money to the United States government. Number three, it will make lending your money to the United States government much faster, because in the traditional process, it can take days for your money to actually transfer and be settled with the United States government. Here, it would happen in a matter of seconds. And number four, and the most important that I want you to pay attention to, is the controlling and programming of rules. When you have an asset that's trading on certain blockchains, that means you have the ability to control the rules. For example, you can build an auto payment feature. So if the United States government wanted to create an auto payment feature to make sure you get paid your interest at a certain time, that can be done. But pay attention to this when we talk about number two. So when it comes to tokenizing our United States national debt, all that essentially means is making it more accessible for people to lend money to the United States government at a faster rate by putting this national debt on the blockchain. And that also creates the programmability function of the United States debt, because now the United States government can create features that will automate or create controls around what happens with the national debt more automatically. This brings us to number two. How would the United States government then use this to devalue or reset the debt? And this is where Russia says that the United States government is going to use this as a way to reset the debt or devalue the dollar. So if the United States debt gets tokenized, that means there's more widespread exposure to the United States dollar, because now people around the world can lend money much easier to the United States government and start generating some interest on their savings. And this is where Russia says that the United States government can then change the rules on the blockchain for the United States debt. Now, we don't know exactly what that would mean, because this is not happening right now, but what they're alleging is maybe the United States government says you went out and lent your money to a 10-year treasury, meaning you're lending your money to the United States government for 10 years, and then they extend the maturity date. So instead of being a 10-year loan, now it's a 12-year loan, because, well, they changed the rules through the blockchain, and it's not through the traditional custodial program that you have to go through when you buy it on Treasury Direct. Or maybe what happens is the United States government then uses this blockchain as a form of control, because if you are not in the United States or in some country that is not getting along with the United States, they cap the ability for you to actually sell your treasuries, because, well, you might be able to do that on the blockchain because you can set those types of rules in the blockchain. So if you own those treasuries in a foreign country that now has issues with the United States, you might have problems trying to get your money out. Or maybe what the United States government could do is they devalue the value of your tokens. Imagine you buy $1 of a digital treasury and you're generating interest on that $1, and then because of a new government policy, that dollar is not worth $1, it's now worth 90 cents. Why? Because it's a way to essentially reduce the value of the national debt by saying, well, it's only going to be worth 90% of what it was before. This would be a form of currency manipulation, or in this case, a currency reset. And we've seen this happen in the past multiple times, but not with blockchain. We've seen it happen with inflation. A lot of people assume that inflation just means the prices of things going up, which is not necessarily wrong, but that's actually the byproduct of what inflation actually is. Inflation comes from the word inflate. And what are you inflating when inflation happens? You're inflating the monetary supply, meaning you are increasing the amount of dollars out there. Well, how does that happen? Let's go back to what I talked about in the beginning of this video. The Federal Reserve Bank is the central bank of the United States. Now, what I didn't say is that the Federal Reserve Bank is actually not a bank, because you and I can't go there to deposit money. It's not a reserve because they're not sitting on any cash reserves, and they're not actually federal, which says so on their website. They're not a part of the federal government. So if they're not a reserve and they lend money to the United States government, how do they actually get that money? Well, they print this money out of thin air. So when the Federal Reserve Bank creates this money out of thin air and they lend it to the United States government, that is what inflation is. You're creating more currency, which causes the value of each individual dollar to go down, which then causes the prices of things to go up. Why does this matter? Because the United States government uses this inflation to reduce the value of this debt. Now, if you've ever talked to your parents or grandparents about how the prices of things were when they were growing up, you've probably heard that 50 years ago you could buy a Snickers bar for a nickel or something along those lines. Today, that same Snickers bar is going to cost you, I don't know, $1.50, $2, I don't know how much it costs, but it costs a lot more. So when that happens, when you have inflation, the real value of the national debt goes down. So for inflation, for the regular person, inflation is bad because that means you have to pay more money to buy your Snickers bars or your guacamole or whatever it is you want to buy. It costs you more dollars. But for the United States government, inflation is good because you can inflate away the value of this debt because now you're paying back this $37 trillion of debt with cheaper dollars. Think of it this way. Let's assume that you bought a house 30 years ago for $500,000. How much is the $500,000 house going to cost you today? Probably a whole lot more, assuming you bought it in a good area. But not just that. If you bought that $500,000 house 30 years ago in 1995 and you got a $400,000 mortgage, well, the $400,000 mortgage was a lot more expensive back in 1995 than it is in 2025 because $400,000 was worth a whole lot more money in 1995 than it was in 2025. Why? Because of inflation. That's why the United States government likes inflation because that makes the value of this debt even less. And this is where we have seen these types of devaluations happening in the past, but it never happened so explicitly with the blockchain. In the past, what would happen is we would see money printing, which would then devalue the value of this national debt, and the average person wouldn't notice. With the blockchain, if the United States government were to reduce the value of your coin by 10%, well then everybody notices it immediately. And now you feel the immediate effects of that because the value of your savings now have less value. And that's where Russia says it gives the United States government the ability to start over because if they then tokenize all $37 trillion of this national debt and now people have more access to it, number one, you have more global exposure to this national debt. And then number two, what the United States government could do hypothetically is they could say that your dollars, your treasures are now worth 20% less, which means effectively they have now $30 trillion of national debt instead of $37 trillion because they're devaluing the currency by devaluing that token value for you. Now again, numbers 2 and 3 have not happened yet. We're starting to see more moves for the United States to potentially tokenize their debt, and what Russia is saying is that if that happens, you can worry about number 2 and number 3. And you have to also understand that Russia has an incentive to say this because they want to fuel some more distrust with the United States and particularly the United States dollar because that would devalue the United States dollar and create more distrust with other foreign countries. So you want to keep that in mind. But you should also understand on the flip side that we have seen things like this happen in the past. For example, in 1971, we saw a big shift with our money. In 1971, President Richard Nixon took the United States dollar off of the gold standard because before that, our currency, our dollars were backed by precious metals like physical gold. After 1971, President Richard Nixon took the dollar off of the gold standard, which allowed the Federal Reserve Bank to essentially print an infinite amount of money. And the reason why he did that is because the United States government owed a lot of money and they couldn't pay back their bills. And so in order for the United States government to pay back their bills, they would need more wealth, in that case more physical gold. And so what Richard Nixon said is if we sever the tie between the United States dollar and gold, we can now print an unlimited amount of money and pay back all of our bills. And that's what they did. So we saw that happen in 1971. It changed the value of the dollar. The consequence was inflation. We also saw something similar happen in 1933. In 1933, remember the Great Depression was happening and the United States government was under a lot of financial pressure. So what did they do? They made it illegal for American citizens to own gold. And if you owned gold, you had to give it to the United States government and you had to sell it to the government at a price that they picked. So if you owned gold, you were now a criminal. And so you had to give that gold to the United States government, which again was a big change for our dollars and our money. What are we going to see happen in 2026 and beyond? Well, only time will tell, but the reason why I want you to understand this is not so you can fall into the hype and emotion of everything going on the news and the internet, is I want you to be a more financially savvy investor and understand how things have played out in history. That way you don't panic, but also understand the opportunities, because the reality is changes are going to happen. And anytime you see changes happen, it creates opportunity for the financially savvy. And that means understanding how to invest your money strategically, building your financial knowledge, building your investor knowledge, instead of getting all emotional. Because unfortunately, a lot of people turn this news into just propaganda. I want you to be a financially savvy investor. That way you can take a deep breath and find the opportunity because everything creates opportunity. What every smart investor wants to know is where is the money moving, because that's where the opportunity can be as well. Again, I have a free investing masterclass that you can watch. I have that link for you down in the description. And if you got value out of this video, the best thank you is a referral. So if you could, please share this video with a friend, a family member, a colleague, or a fellow investor. That way we can continue to spread the word. The United States government owes more than $37 trillion. That means your tax dollars are being used to pay interest on all that debt. And this is where President Trump has been proposing a new plan to help pay off this debt involving gold and involving crypto. And most people have no idea of how this plan works or the implication of this new plan on your money.